So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to assemble the face frame with our Domino 500 joiner. Let's get to work. So what I typically do is I'll just kind of look at the grain, decide which side I want faced out, what side looks better. Once I get those all sorted out the way I want them, then it's a matter of deciding how I'm going to join these together. So what we're going to use is the Domino DF 500 loose tenon mortising machine. And it uses solid wood domino tenons. We have these in different sizes for different types of material, different thicknesses of material. The size we're going to use today is a 6x40, so it's 6 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters long. So first thing I want to do on the domino itself is change out the cutter that we have in there. To do that, we have a wrench that comes with the domino. Let's pop that up. That comes out. Then on the side we have a spindle lock. I'll just pop the 5 millimeter cutter that I have on there, take that off, and then put the 6 millimeter on there. So the diameter of the bit determines the thickness of the mortise that we're going to be making. And then I'll show you what determines the width here in a second. Now when you go to tighten that bit, don't over tighten it. Just snug it up, because as you use the machine, it's going to tighten itself down. And then just push it all back together. So the way this bit works is it spins like a drill bit or a router bit, and it oscillates back and forth. That is what's going to determine the width of our mortise. So the length and the diameter of the bit determines the thickness and the width of the mortise. Next, I have to determine where I'm going to place the mortises in the face frames. The domino is very easy to use because it has reference points on the machine itself. So all the accuracy is in the machine. These reference points are exactly 37 millimeters from the flap to the center of the mortise. So if we look here closer, the domino will set that mortise centered at 37 millimeters from one of these edges. So if I measure here over 37 millimeters, approximately right there. Now my tenon is 20 millimeters wide. So if I go 10 millimeters on either side of that mark, right there and right there, you can see how close that's going to be the outside edge. That is way too close to that edge. So we have another option. The domino comes with the support foot. And the support foot has 2 more reference stops on it as well. These will place the mortise 20 millimeters from the edge to the center of my mortise. So that's what I'm going to use. Installing the support base is pretty simple. I just put the fence up on the domino, and on the bottom there's 2 threaded holes. I like to install it in this fashion. I'll show you why here in a second. So if I was just to lift it up and try and put it in here, there's some slop in the base. So this keeps it perfectly flat and even with the front of the domino. Now you can see these 2 flaps. They register off the 37 millimeter flaps. That gives me 20 millimeters from here to the center of my mortise. So once the domino is about set up, we want to think about how we're going to make these mortises and all these pieces. The biggest key to the domino, no matter what you're using it on, if you're building a table, a cabinet, whatever you're building, is label all your parts and pieces. So you don't get turned around, you don't get confused. I mean, what I do is I'll just go around and mark A, B, so on and so forth, all around the entire piece. Then I also want to think about where the mortises are going to go. So in this corner here, I have 2 spots that I can reference those flaps off of to get me 20 millimeters to the center of my mortise. But right here, I've got a reference point that I can pull off of, but on this board I don't. So what I'll do is use these blocks that we cut earlier, 114 millimeters, they're just spacer blocks. I'll get those lined up, and then I'll just take a straight edge of some sort and go approximately center. It doesn't have to be exact, I just like it close. Now I've got 2 lines to put a mortise in there, that I can reference off of the domino machine itself. So I'll just walk around and do that to the rest of the pieces, and then we can get started mortising. So when I go to lay out my mortises for my center style, in the cabinet. On the bottom, I don't have anything. I can do some measuring. The more I measure, the more I have a chance to make a mistake. So I'm just gonna use my face frame for the underside of the drawer, move that down, butt it up tight against that side, push that over. Now I know that is gonna be the same as up here, even if my board has a slight bow to it. Take my straight edge, get myself a center line. One thing I always do before I'm using any woodworking equipment is double check my settings. If I look down here, both of these two settings are off. This is my board thickness gauge, so this is how far from the plate of the domino to the center of my mortise I'm gonna be. Basically, where that mortise is gonna be in the material. I want that at 20. My material here is about 18 millimeters. So at 20, that's gonna get me close to center, which is gonna be fine. And this is how far into the board I'm gonna make a mortise. I want that 20 as well because I'm using a 40 millimeter long tenon. So I'm gonna do half and half in each piece. So for the first mortise I'm gonna reference off of one of my 20 millimeter reference points. So I just reference it off the corner, rotate it into place, make sure I've got firm pressure on my T-handle. So on this piece, I'm not going to use any of the reference flaps. I'm just going to use this line as a reference point. So I just find that line with the line on the domino itself, and then I can make a mortise. Reference point is very important with the domino. I'm doing both ends of this with a mortise. And if you noticed, I was flipping it around this way. What some people will do is they'll flip it like that and they won't think anything of it. What I just did is I just changed my reference point from this side to this side. If you remember, we had the depth of the mortise from the fence down at 20 millimeters. This material is 18 millimeters. It's 2 millimeters difference. So if I change my reference point, when I put this piece back together, it's gonna be sitting crooked. So I'll have a 2 millimeter lip over here and a 2 millimeter offset over here. So always make sure you reference off the correct face. All the mortise is done, we can start talking about doing a dry fit. I always do a dry fit. I don't care how accurate I think I am. There's always that chance for a little bit of mistakes. So no glue first, but you'll need a couple tools to get this started. I always like to have a good pair of side cuts or pliers around, a hand sanding block, and a little hammer to tap the dominoes in because they are a tight fit. These dominoes are very precise. The machine's very precise. It's designed to be tight. If you look at the edge right here, there's a little raised groove. And that groove is just a slight bit wider than the actual mortise itself. That's for alignment purposes, make it nice and snug. What I do is I'll get a hand sanding block and I'll just lightly sand down that groove so there's no groove on either side. So when I do a dry fit, it slides right in. It doesn't affect the alignment. What I don't want to do is sand it this way. Take any width off the thickness. All right? Let's get that started. That's what I've got my little hammer for. For the center one, what I typically like to do is I'll get the end started and slowly wiggle it in there and then tip that up at an angle, and I can bring it all together as one piece. And that's going to be really important when you go for glue up to get that lined up correctly. Looks like it turned out pretty good. Next step is glue up. I get questions all the time on how to glue up for mortise and tenon, for domino mortise and tenon. Do you put glue in the mortise? Do you put glue on the tenon? What I typically do is I'll put glue on the tenon itself. If you look at the face of the domino, there's cross hatches all over it, as well as grooves on the edge. When I put glue on that and then put it in the mortise, that glue will spread up the tenon itself, and then it'll squeeze out where you've got the two pieces connected. It gives good coverage over the entire tenon itself. Then I just put a little light clamping pressure on there. Once I get them all lined up and glued up, wipe off any excess glue, let it sit overnight, and then you're ready for sanding. If you'd like to continue watching this cabinet build, click here, or watch this video. And don't forget to subscribe.